Good evening and welcome one and all. I'm sorry we're starting slightly late. We always seem to here. The motion before the House this evening, this House believes Northern Ireland ought to remain part of the United Kingdom. This is a historical debate. When we were coming up with the motions for this term, I sat and went through the records that go back to about 1815 when we were started. And we've done this topic many times. We did it in the 20s. We did it during the Troubles. We did it during the Good Friday Agreement negotiations. And we're doing it now, the centenary of the Irish Free State, and with the controversy of the protocol. There are three excellent guest speakers this evening, and they're very welcome. There are also three students who have won their spots through open audition, but they're just part of the debate. You are all entitled to stand up and intervene in this debate whenever you want. It is up to the speakers themselves whether they take those interventions, but I've encouraged them all to do so. On the back of your order paper are the rules about doing that. One point of clarification from last week, a point of order versus a point of information. Points of order, this sounds pernickety, but it's very important. Points of order are about my conduct in the chair. So, if you want to raise a point of order, that means you think I should have intervened when I haven't, or you think I shouldn't have intervened when I have. And you're welcome to make them at any time. Points of information, they pertain to the speakers, or the speeches given.
Points of clarification.
I have no idea what that... not taken. I'm going to get on to our speakers very quickly, but I just want to encourage you all to speak as often as you want to. The first speaker on proposition this evening is Sir Geoffrey Donaldson. Sir Geoffrey is the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, Northern Ireland's largest unionist party. Having served in Northern Ireland Executive between 2003 and 2010, he now represents Lagan Valley as an MP. Sir Geoffrey, I'm very much looking forward to what you have to say this evening. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It's good to be back in the Cambridge Union again, and thank you for this invitation. When I was thinking about what I might say about the proposition that Northern Ireland should remain part of the United Kingdom, I think it is important to say that for me personally, being part of the United Kingdom is hugely important. I regard my British citizenship as my birthright. I didn't sit down at the age of 6 months with a calculator and work out that I was better off being British and being part of the United Kingdom rather than being part of a United Ireland. I was born into my British citizenship. It is my birthright. My family have been living on the island of Ireland for over 400 years. So I'm as much part of the island as anyone else. I was born on the island. The island is my home. I have no difficulty in saying that I am Irish because I live on the island of Ireland. I do not subscribe to the view that being Irish means you define yourself as part of a distinct nation. My Irishness is equally comfortable with my Britishness. In the same way that someone from Scotland can be Scottish and British, someone from Wales can be Welsh and British, and of course someone from England can be English and British. The concept of Britishness is it's a family of different identities. And that's why I feel I fit in, because the British nation, or whatever you want to describe it, is a very diverse concept. It isn't stereotypical. People who live in Orkney and Shetland are as British as me, even though geographically we live far apart. And I do not subscribe to the view that geography defines who we are. But I do subscribe to the view in the context of the island of Ireland that we have the right to identify, to self-identify. And I respect absolutely the right of those who do not regard themselves as British, but as Irish only, who are my neighbours in Northern Ireland, to do so. I live on a road in a rural community in County Down. My next door neighbours carry Irish passports. My family carry British passports. And the value of the Belfast or Good Friday Agreement is that we have the right to carry either or both. But it doesn't change the fact that Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, because that is the settled will of a majority of the people in Northern Ireland. And our current constitutional arrangements determine that it is the principle of consent. It is the right of the people of Northern Ireland themselves to determine whether to be part of the United Kingdom or to enter into a new arrangement and be part of a united Ireland.
Point of information?
Of course.
So there's not going to be a referendum in Northern Ireland about reuniting with Ireland?
Well, why do we need a referendum when we know that that is the settled will? But of course there is provision for a referendum in the future. If the government believes that that has changed, there is the provision for a referendum. I don't fear a referendum, but I am concerned that holding a referendum in circumstances where I don't believe the people of Northern Ireland are going to change their constitutional status actually simply polarizes the community. It polarizes debate, and it divides people. It is a very divisive thing. So why do we need to do that when at the heart of what we're trying to do in Northern Ireland is build a shared future?
Point of information, has recent data showing increase in support for parties such as Sinn Féin and decrease in support for parties such as DUP not shown an increasing mandate for a referendum and an increasing will of people?
Not at all, because the support for unionism generally has not reduced in reference to the support for nationalism. The nationalist parties in Northern Ireland get about 35% of the vote. The unionist parties about 45% of the vote, and there's about 20% in the middle who in a referendum, consistent polling shows, about 80% of them will vote to stay in the United Kingdom. So I don't think that the argument follows that a reduction in support for unionist parties means a reduction in support for the union. There's still a large element of that middle ground that is very strongly pro-union in Northern Ireland. So I think that what we need to do, and of course we've come through a very, very bloody, difficult conflict in Northern Ireland. Rather than always focusing on this issue, that we should be also looking at, how do we build a shared future? And as a unionist who believes passionately in Northern Ireland remaining part of the United Kingdom, I also want to build a stronger relationship with our neighbours in the Republic of Ireland. I want to see that relationship flourish. But of course, we know, and it no doubt will be mentioned this evening, that there are difficulties at the moment because the arrangements post-Brexit have disrupted the very delicate constitutional balance that is represented in the Good Friday Agreement. But that does not diminish my sense of who I am, my sense of Britishness, and my desire to see Northern Ireland remain part of the United Kingdom. And you will hear from David many of the practical arguments of why Northern Ireland should remain part of the United Kingdom. I think in economic terms, Northern Ireland is better off as part of the fifth largest economy in the world. Northern Ireland benefits from that. We saw that during the recent pandemic with the furloughing scheme, with support for businesses, and with our National Health Service, something they don't have in the Republic of Ireland, but that we have in Northern Ireland. And we benefit from being part of the United Kingdom by being part of the National Health Service. Healthcare free at the point of access. And that is really important to people in Northern Ireland. So in economic terms, I have no doubt that the union makes sense for us. It leaves Northern Ireland stronger in economic terms, being part of a much larger economy. I've mentioned the National Health Service. And of course, we have devolution in Northern Ireland. So we have a Northern Ireland Assembly, an executive that enables local people to be involved in decision-making at that level. But there are also strong ties between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom. Strong family bonds, culturally, historically, socially. We are bound together as part of the United Kingdom. I would describe myself as emotionally unionist as well as pragmatically unionist. For me, it is not just a question of, is this economically beneficial? Do we benefit in terms of our education system, health service, and so on? Yes, we do. But, I feel when I look at the symbols of the British state, I identify with them. I accept there are many in Northern Ireland who don't. And that's why we have agreements to enable us to come together and to share in building a future. But it must mean that we respect each other and we respect our Britishness. And I think we need to work harder on that, on both sides in Northern Ireland, in terms of building that culture of respect for the diversity of our sense of identity and of who we are and of the place that we belong. And I think the United Kingdom accommodates that. And I really don't believe a united Ireland can accommodate my sense of Britishness in a way that the United Kingdom can accommodate someone, of course.
How can I be Irish in Northern Ireland, yet you not be British in a united Ireland?
Because being British means identifying with the United Kingdom. And, you know, we've seen in the Republic of Ireland that British connection has been greatly eroded over the years. And I talk to people whose families would have been Unionist in Cavan, Monaghan and Donegal, for example, and they don't feel that their sense of Britishness was accommodated within the Irish Free State, that it was perpetuated within the Irish Free State, that it was given its place within the Irish Free State. And I don't think that my Britishness will be accommodated to the extent that I would wish to see it accommodated within a united Ireland. But of course, my Britishness is not just based on the notion of geography or so on. It is, as I've said, and I'm at pains to point out, it is, I have an emotional attachment to the United Kingdom and to my sense of Britishness. And how can that be accommodated in the United Ireland when I'm being taken out of the United Kingdom?
Thank you, Sir Jeffrey. Do you accept that the Republic of Ireland has made a lot of efforts in recent years to reach the hand of Indigenous families and traditions, particularly notable recent developments of resurrection of the Grand Orange Lodge in Trinity College Dublin, as well as orange marches in Rosslava, County Donegal, as well as the Royal Dublin Society paying heritage to its British tradition?
Yeah, I think there has been real progress on both sides of the border, I think it is fair to say. And yet at times we do have setbacks as well. I think when you go beneath the surface, there are still deep feelings about all of this and about the history and how things have happened. And, we've just gone, we're actually not yet completed the centenary year of Northern Ireland. And, that has not been an experience where people have, particularly from the nationalist community, have sought to engage in that. And similarly, I think that, President Higgins' decision not to attend the ecumenical service in Armagh to mark the centenary of Northern Ireland was a mistake, in my opinion. That was an opportunity to reach out to Unionists and to acknowledge the existence of Northern Ireland, and I think it is regrettable that that didn't happen. So, in conclusion, I want to have a good relationship with my neighbours in the Republic of Ireland, but I don't want to be part of a united Ireland. I'm quite happy being part of the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland being part of the United Kingdom, because I believe that in the diversity of our identities and viewpoints, we can be accommodated in the United Kingdom, because the United Kingdom in itself comprises a very diverse, of course, finally.
How can you say that Irishness can be accommodated within the United Kingdom when nationalists and alike are completely disregarded within Northern Ireland continuously? And you see the Boris Johnson government completely ignore the will of nationalists in Northern Ireland, and the DUP blatantly being racist and completely ignoring these communities. And all these types of glassy words that you use to try and describe the type of harmonious relations that your party is furthering are completely not true when you see the lived experiences of people in Northern Ireland.
Well, first of all, why is Irishness defined by Irish nationalism? I'm Irish, but I'm a Unionist. So why, but you're saying that we disregard, I am Irish. Would I disregard myself? I don't disregard myself. I am proud of the fact that St. Patrick is my patron saint. His effigy is above the central lobby of the House of Commons. Being Irish and British are not mutually exclusive. And the idea that goes to the heart of this debate, that you cannot be Irish unless you're a nationalist, that you can't be Irish unless you subscribe to the view that Ireland is a nation and everyone who is Irish is part of that nation. I'm sorry, but the people I represent are British and Irish. They want to remain part of the United Kingdom, and they don't want to be told that you can't be Irish unless you're a nationalist. I disagree with that entirely. Final point.
How can you say that you support the Irish identity when your party has been so against measures such as the Irish Language Act, which is something which is intrinsic to the Irish identity?
We are certainly not against the Irish language. What we are against is the politicalisation of the Irish language. That is not the way forward in Northern Ireland. Mutual respect for culture and and identity is important. I want to see those who wish to pursue their Irish cultural identity as strongly as they wish to. I want to see that happen. But what I'm not in favour of is the politicisation of Irish identity. I think that is wrong. And I don't think that is conducive towards the kind of shared future that we want. So in conclusion, the idea that being Irish is some kind of monocultural theme or ideal, I have to challenge. I have to challenge. My father served in the Royal Irish Regiment. Does that mean he can't be British? I am proud to have an Irish background, but I can also be British and part of the United Kingdom. And I challenge entirely the notion that the only way you can be Irish is to subscribe to the view that everyone who is Irish is part of an Irish nation and therefore can't be part of something else. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Geoffrey, and thank you for taking so many interventions. Can we please quiet down? So I can move to the first speaker on opposition this evening, Declan Kearney. Declan has served as MP for South Antrim in the Northern Ireland Assembly since 2016. He previously served as National Chairman of Sinn Féin. Declan, you have the ears of the House.
Well, chéadal sios mo bhuathe Steve go léir agus don Aontas as 8 an corú a thuirt dúsa dé an seo leibhanne agus páirte glacu an San Gisbrach suntasach seo, so mo bhuathe stitche chaithirlí agus daobhse a chairte. I oppose this motion because the continued jurisdiction of the British state in the north of Ireland represents a denial of the universally recognised right to self-determination. But your debate itself is very timely. Coincidentally, it comes at a time when the sustainability of the very British state is now in doubt. The narrow English nationalist ideological agenda which has defined this Tory government and its reckless pursuit of the hardest possible Brexit has had disastrous consequences. Brexit has been a catastrophe, not only for the north of Ireland, and the majority of citizens in the north voted against Brexit, but every week it is clearer that Brexit is a disaster for businesses and workers in England, Scotland and Wales. And since the Brexit referendum in 2016, the Tory government has engaged in a power grab to centralise power in London. And through an undemocratic and a regressive overreach, they have undermined the autonomy of the devolved administrations in Scotland and Wales, and also our unique bespoke power-sharing arrangements in the north of Ireland based upon the Good Friday Agreement. And that has caused, friends, a democratic crisis for intergovernmental relations between the administrations in Scotland, Wales and the north of Ireland and the London government itself. Now, since 2010, successive Tory administrations have been absolutely derelict in fulfilling the British government's co-guarantor obligations to implement the Good Friday Agreement with rigorous impartiality. Brexit has created an earthquake at the very heart of the British state. And the levels of support now for Scottish independence, for instance, are at an all-time high. There's a growing demand for maximised devolution powers in Wales. And now in Ireland, the prospect of constitutional change is fixed on the political horizon. A defining watershed has opened up for relationships in Ireland and between Ireland, Britain and Europe. And there's a stark irony, I believe, that the fragmentation of the British state in plain sight is actually being driven by the politics of the Conservative and Unionist Party itself. The Tories have made the British government an outlier in terms of European and transatlantic relations. The reputation of this government has been trashed within the international community. And to paraphrase John Major, This is a government which breaks the law, breaks international treaties, and breaks its word. And those realities set the context, friends, for tonight's debate. Last year marked the centenary of the violent partition of Ireland by a British government. Its imposition was a denial of the democratic right of Irish people to self-determination in 1921. And the relationship between our two islands has been characterised by colonialism, political division, and partition itself, and I say that as an objective political reality. Yes?
Wouldn't you say that the situation in 2022 is much more complex? Time has moved on. You're basing your argument off what happened hundreds of years ago. People obviously moved across from England, from Scotland. Their families integrated, and they have many generations of living there. So basing your entire argument off colonialism and the British having taken over Ireland, wouldn't you admit that the situation today is much more complex than that?
My entire argument is premised upon the universal acceptance and operation of self-determination in the context of principles that are accepted internationally in relation to how international norms and relationships are conducted. And I speak about the colonial legacy in Ireland as an objective historical reality and something that we cannot absent or take out with the debate in terms of the current realities of Irish society today. You see, institutionalised discrimination and state repression were the lived experience of successive generations of nationalists from 1921. I'm not making an exaggerated point to say my parents and my grandparents lived in an apartheid state. I live with the legacy of a sectarian, one-party apartheid state in the here and the now. Do I want to change that? Absolutely. I am absolutely committed to changing those realities. And I also recognise that unionists have a separate narrative. Theirs was a different lived experience to mine. Briefly.
Isn't it a gross distortion to describe the state of Northern Ireland today as an apartheid state, comparing it to its state even 100 years ago?
My friend, you weren't listening to me. I said that I live with the legacy of an apartheid state that existed from the imposition of partition. And in my remarks this evening, I will set out a context where we have transformed the political context. That is why it is time for the Irish people to have the right to self-determination. However, the political and the economic and the cultural consequences of what happened in the build-up to partition and since continue to reverberate today. We can't abstract the reality of today from the reality of the past. But all of that has changed with the advent of the Irish peace process and the signing of the Good Friday Agreement in 1998. And it was a watershed moment in British and Irish relations because it drew a line under centuries of political conflict between our islands. And our peace process, our peace agreement, was overwhelmingly endorsed through referenda held north and south by the majority of citizens in the island of Ireland. And it did guarantee parity of esteem and equality for all citizens. And it established a framework for how we could democratically manage change into the future. And crucially, it removed the British government's veto on constitutional change, and it replaced it with the consent of citizens who live in the north of Ireland and by extension the southern Irish state. So the Good Friday Agreement provides us all with a democratic path for achieving Irish unity. It restores the right of the exercise of self-determination by the Irish people through concurrent referenda north and south. No, not at the moment. The whole of Ireland has been dramatically transformed since 1998, and I think that's great. In the north, the once monolithic unionist majority has gone. That's good. For the first time since partition, Irish Republican and Nationalist MPs elected to Westminster outnumber Unionist MPs. And the political process in the north of Ireland is defined by power sharing under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement, and that is a good thing. The balance of power, friends, has moved away from unionism, and that is reflected in today's regional assembly. And voices and votes within our assembly now regularly attract cross-party, cross-community support. The majority of Assembly members are socially progressive. They oppose Brexit and they support the smooth operation of the protocol. But the onset of Brexit has created the biggest constitutional crisis for political unionism in the British government in 100 years. That is an objective political reality. And it's graphically exposed by the undemocratic nature and the failure of partition itself. But at the same time, the realignment of politics, north and south, is happening in plain sight. And the momentum for a united Ireland has never been stronger. Now, that doesn't mean that a united Ireland and constitutional change is inevitable, because there's much more discussion and engagement required. But there is no denying that constitutional change and Irish unity and the debate around both is now in the political mainstream. And attitudes are changing in the north. Fundamental demographic change is also happening. And some from within the Unionist and the Protestant backgrounds are beginning to think outside the contours of partition in the northern state. And they aspire to a society which is based upon modern, liberal, pluralist values. A society, friends, where marriage equality, language rights, women's reproductive health care are not contested issues. And they quite reasonably associate Irish unity with the way back into the European Union. And the European Union has said as much in April 2017. One of Ireland's most foremost economic thinkers and commentators, David McWilliams, said last November, it makes no sense for an island this small to be divided. And he is one of a growing body of opinion who sees change on the horizon. A united Ireland would allow for the economy and society on the island to be organised and managed in the interests of Irish citizens. And our business community, the trade union movement, and many others are beginning to model for that change. But we need to plan the milestones for an orderly change. And therefore, progressive constitutional change should be seen as a modernising societal political influence. And to conclude in these remarks, there is now the prospect of two new sovereign states emerging in Scotland and Ireland, alongside a Welsh state with maximised autonomous arrangements. And that opens up the potential for new forms of progressive and positive cooperation between these islands for the first time in 100 years. There's much, much more to be done. But building the foundations for authentic reconciliation must be central to all of that. And we've lived through a terrible conflict. And I, as a Republican leader, am deeply sorry about everything that has happened thus. But now we must build to the future. Build towards unity, constitutional change and reconciliation, because they are indivisible. The British government should begin to work in genuine collaboration to manage the transition. The Irish government should convene a National Citizens' Assembly as milestones to take us forward on the trajectory to Irish reunification and constitutional change. And in conclusion, you've had a point of information and you're a contributor to the debate. Of course. I'll take your point of information in a moment. So both governments should agree a date for concurrent Irish unity referenda, north and south, under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement. Yes, your point of information, please.
You seem to be devoting great attention to political stances and Brexit, but is it feasible to leave a country every time you don't agree with what the current government is doing? Wouldn't it be like, at least at best, weird if the people who don't agree with Brexit seceded altogether and formed a different country? Isn't it better to discuss? Isn't it what democracy is about? To stay within a country and discuss through the democratic process?
Yes, of course. But the reality is that Brexit was imposed upon the people of the north of Ireland because the majority voted against Brexit, as did the majority in Scotland. So you're mixing apples and oranges. And taken into the context of the denial of the right of self-determination to Irish people as a consequence of partition, as a consequence of partition and the role of Connor's government, then we need to reset relations and look to different options. Yes, please.
How do you ameliorate that situation when 2 years prior to the Brexit vote in Scotland, there was a vote to stay in the UK?
And I believe that we're going to see a bill brought before the Scottish Parliament later this year, which will invoke a new independence referendum in 2023. We are living through game-changing times. Time is running out for the current status of the British state. And what I would say is this, that British government policy and Tory government policy towards the north of Ireland and its failure to implement the Good Friday Agreement has run out of road. So it's time for change. It's time for constitutional change, and it's time for Irish unity. Fundamentally, it is time to give Irish citizens what has been denied them for 100 years at the point of a gun, and that is the exercise of the right of self-determination. Thank you all.
Declan, thank you very much. The level of participation thus far has been fantastic. Patrick and I are doing this with quite a sort of soft touch at the moment. If one of the speakers, I'm hoping you're not going to start your speeches now by saying in conclusion, but once the speaker is trying to conclude, if we can just let them do so, because we'll get out the speech quicker. But I don't want to deter you from intervening, because it's fantastic. We're going to move to a round of floor speeches. I see lots of people who audition to speak in the main debate, so hopefully you might pick up your hand now. But do we have anyone who wants to say something short, 2 to 3 minutes, in proposition of the motion this evening? Just here, please.
Thank you.
Name and college, please.
Patrick Reed, Downing College. So we heard a lot from the previous speaker. I thought about Ireland's right to self-determination. And I think everybody in this room would agree that national self-determination is very important. But it was national self-determination from a very one-sided argument. This was the view that it's only determination if it's secession. And Northern Ireland has recognised its right to be part of the Union. And that is a form of national self-determination in and of itself. This is partially recognised. The partition of Ireland almost brings this recognition that there is division on the island of Ireland between whether or not people want to be independent and they don't. Northern Ireland is a recognition of this problem, and that's why Northern Ireland, I think, should be part of the United Kingdom. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, for that pithy point. Anyone in opposition this evening? Just here.
This will be a brief floor speech, but the prior speaker who made the floor speech misunderstands what self-determination is. Self-determination is that as a people, as a group. If every time there was a people with differences, we simply split it down the middle and created new groups, new factions, new divisions, that would be detrimental to every people with disagreements. As one of the audience members mentioned previously, the purpose of a nation is to have disagreements and to resolve those disagreements rather than sowing division through concepts like partition. Thank you very much. No, I'm not taking that.
There you have it. And anyone in abstention this evening? I think that was the first hand at the back. Actually, no. I take that back. Yours was before. You can go first.
Thank you.
Name and college, please.
Luke Patterson, Lucy Cavendish College. And with your discretion, I may go slightly over the time limit to represent the 40% of people in Northern Ireland who do not identify as nationalist or unionist, but please feel free to stop me. It is, of course, natural that during a debate like this, a binary debate, that people are forced to take sides, forced to the extremes in some circumstances. However, we need to open this debate up and focus on what the people of Northern Ireland want and actually need. Poll after poll do show that people in Northern Ireland are content with the status quo. And when talking about the status quo, I mean the constitutional status quo, not the political or social status quo. There's a lot of issues with that. I must take this opportunity to remind the Chamber that Northern Ireland isn't this community, this society, this nation that is divided along Irish or British lines, nationalist or unionist. We are one community, a diverse series of thoughts, but a united community. The same things keep us up at night, the same things that we worry about. We all have the same education and health struggles. We may have different long-term aspirations, for the place we call home, but we have the same short-term issues. Before we talk about a united Ireland or attempt to defend the supposed benefits of the Union, let's focus on making Northern Ireland work. Our children, 24 years since the Good Friday Agreement, are still being educated separately. We have a healthcare system which, despite significantly more funding per head than anywhere else in the UK, has the worst health outcomes. And when I say bad health outcomes, I mean the only reason waiting lists are going down is people are dying. They are that long. Let's focus on integrating our education system, improving our healthcare system, investing in the rest of the country, which has been destroyed by a lack of investment since the formation of the state. Dara, you'll talk about that later for your whole speech.
Sorry. Do you think Mr. Burns is going to give us the money to do that when he and his party presided over cutting every single thing in Northern Ireland and in the budget are going to cut it by real terms?
That is a very fair point, and I do not have the power to read Connor's mind or that of his colleague, the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Maybe that is a good thing, I don't know. And focus on public infrastructure, our water system, our transport system, and focus on the scourge that still exists of paramilitary control over our communities. And I thank Jeffrey and Declan for their speeches so far and the tones that they have struck. And I thank Declan for what seems to be an apology, a sincere apology for the actions over 30 years. And as someone whose family was affected by violence, I hope that is sincere. But Jeffrey, you know I'll not let you off the hook. I join you in seeking this shared community. We need a shared community, no matter the constitutional outcome of any border poll, or if there is no constitutional change, we need a shared community. We are a shared community, as I have said. However, rhetoric has been delivered. That is destabilising Northern Ireland. I know many people have different views on the protocol. Some see the benefits of it, some say there are significant issues with it. However, let's focus on making it work, not divisive language.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up.
Yes, I will, James. Jeffrey opposed the Good Friday Agreement, our de facto constitution in Northern Ireland, which delivered a peace on these islands. And a key component of that are the institutions, the executive and the assembly, of which 76% of people value having. So I do not think the falling of devolution is of benefit to anyone. So may I conclude by saying, and hopefully not striking the political party podcast for the Alliance Party, that on the 5th of May there is a chance for change in Northern Ireland this Assembly election. And I do hope that we can ensure that we find a new politics in Northern Ireland outside of the binary choice we're being presented this evening. Thank you.
I very much enjoyed that, which is why I let it run. But if we could try and keep to 2 minutes-ish for those floor interventions, that'd be great. We'll move to the next set of paper speakers this evening. And David Eagleson, our very own David Eagleson, in proposition. David is a second-year law student at Trinity College. He's also head of events management here at the Union, and he won this spot through open audition. David, the floor is yours.
It's great to see so many of you here this evening to debate the future of Northern Ireland. The position of Northern Ireland within the United Kingdom is a matter very close to my own heart. I'm a born and raised Ulsterman who grew up in a nationalist community in nationalist-dominated Tyrone. And I never imagined that one day I would have the opportunity to participate in a debate on the future of the region in such esteemed company. Now, the opposition tonight have told you that Northern Ireland ought to leave the UK. They've argued that Northern Ireland ought to become part of a united Ireland. Declan has painted a narrative built on the theft of Ireland from its own people. Now, a couple of floor speeches have already discussed Declan's apparent misunderstanding of the right to self-determination, and I hope, Declan, that you now understand just why I was trying to intervene. The point is that no international court has recognized a right of succession for a minority group. And we negotiated the Good Friday Agreement because it provides a framework by which the nationalist community in Northern Ireland, might work constructively with the unionist community. Yes, Saifullah.
Would that not impact the legality of the original partition?
Could you elaborate on your point, Saifullah, just so I know where you're coming from?
Self-determination is of a people as a whole rather than an individual subset of a people.
Precisely.
So would that not impact the original legality of a partition based on political views?
Well, the whole point, Saifullah, of the Good Friday Agreement is that the people of Northern Ireland have to work together so that eventually, if a majority do decide that they want to be part of United Ireland, they can then exercise that right of self-determination and they can choose that reality. But the point is that at this moment in time, the majority of Northern Ireland would not choose that. So to reunify Ireland at this moment in time would undermine the consent of the Northern Irish people. Not only that, but it would significantly damage Northern Ireland's economy, reduce access to public services, and leave unionists without protection for their culture and identity. It would deprive citizens elsewhere in the UK of Titanic Belfast, Bushmills whiskey, the Giant's Causeway, and of course, pointless answers for UK cities on a certain popular quiz show. And if anyone thinks that I'm exaggerating the contribution which Northern Ireland has made to British culture, can anyone who's not seen the TV show Dairy Girls raise your hand now? Just a few. No, thank you. The people of Northern Ireland overwhelmingly support continued membership of the United Kingdom. Even many of those in traditionally nationalist communities are in favour of that membership because they recognise the benefits, no thank you Declan, that it has conferred on them. A border poll, sorry Dara, a border poll is always conveniently around the corner. Even Mr. Kearney himself said that it's on the horizon. But every time an official poll is released, the narrative that they tell us is always the same. Next time, a majority will support reunification. But do you know what, ladies and gentlemen? That's never the case. Polls consistently show that a majority of people favour remaining within the United Kingdom. And I can see a smirk on Mr. Kearney's face. But the timing, it seems, going to have to decline at this point, Dara, but I will in a moment. The timing is never right for nationalists. Recent polling demonstrates that 2/3 of Northern Irish voters might want a border poll, but only 37% want it within the next 5 years. So it would seem that most nationalists are quite happy within the United Kingdom. They have stable jobs, their rights are protected, and they have access to free, world-leading healthcare. And Dara, if you still want to make your point of information, you can.
I was going to ask, which polls are you citing? And do you recognise a poll by Lucid Talk, online polling? Now, you mightn't believe in it, but how close are those polls taken by Lucid Talk? And in the last Assembly election, how large was the unionist plurality? Far away. No, don't worry.
A 2020 poll was conducted by the Northern Ireland Life and Times. That is a respected agency. It was set up by Queen's University and Ulster University. In that survey, it was found that 53% of people said that they would vote to remain in the United Kingdom if a poll were held tomorrow. Only 30% of people said that they would vote for a united Ireland. So, I'm a law student, so what are the legal ramifications of that? Well, the Northern Ireland Act provides a mechanism by which a referendum may be called on Northern Ireland's constitutional status within the UK. Section 1 enshrines the principle of consent. It says that Northern Ireland is to remain within the UK unless a majority of people in Northern Ireland decide otherwise in an official border poll called by the Secretary of State. Now, the Secretary of State may only call such a poll if he believes that a majority would vote in favour of reunification. As we've seen from the poll that I've cited, that's simply not the case. So I urge this House to support and respect the will of the majority in Northern Ireland, and in doing so, to demonstrate their commitment to upholding the rule of law. Now, those like Mr. Kearney will often tell you that the economies of North and South are considerably intertwined, but this trade pales in comparison to that between Northern Ireland and Great Britain. The Northern Irish economy is significantly supported by an annual block grant from Westminster of £10 to £12 billion euros. And I can see you nodding, Dara. We did discuss this the other day. So that's equivalent to around 20% of the Republic's annual tax revenues. So uniting Ireland would create a situation which the Irish economy is simply incapable of sustaining. Sinn Féin would have to sell quite a few of the Palestinian flags available on their website if they would begin to fund the reunification of even one border town. They might even have to remove the special offer they currently have available on the Irish flag. Now, much of the money pumped into Northern Ireland from Westminster is used to support public services. And among the largest recipients of this money is the National Health Service. Now, the National Health Service is revered by many, and it provides free healthcare at the point of access in Northern Ireland. What would healthcare look like in a united Ireland? Well, currently in the Republic of Ireland, private health insurance will set you back around £1,700 a year. Now, given the information that I've gleaned from the Northern Ireland Research and Statistics Agency, if that's reputable enough for you, says that the average salary of a Northern Irish worker in 2019 was only around £27,000. This means that the cost of healthcare in the Republic for an average Northern Irish worker would amount to around 6% of their annual salary. Now, the SDLP, whose leader sadly had better things to do this evening, have blamed the Conservative Party and the policy of austerity for what they describe as the chronic under-resourcing of the health service in Northern Ireland. Now, it's unclear how they expect healthcare in a united Ireland to be much better. In the EuroHealth Consumer Index of 2016, the Republic scored the worst in terms of the number of people waiting on access to healthcare and the length of time which they waited. Dara, you've asked a point of information I'm going to have to decline. A move to a united Ireland would inevitably weaken access to public services, including access to emergency healthcare. Now, we've all heard of the films Carry On Doctor and Carry On Nurse. In a nationalist united Ireland, we'd all be engaged in our own version, Carry On Waiting. Now, culture and identity is another important point. Culture and identity are a huge part of life in Northern Ireland. From the 17th of March to the 12th of July, you'll find no shortage of people who enjoy celebrating their cultural identity. Of course, the one cultural benefit of United Ireland might be that the Orange Order could finally make use of the Battle of the Boyne site in County Meath and make it the centrepiece of their annual commemorations. But of course, embracing unionist culture may become a necessity in a united Ireland. Of course, by the time that 20% of annual tax revenues have been spent funding Northern Ireland's public services, 11th night bonfires might be the only way to guide aircraft into Dublin Airport. Within the United Kingdom, the cultural activities of both unionist and nationalist communities are protected by governing bodies such as the Parades Commission. These bodies help to ensure that these celebrations passed off respectfully and peacefully. Laws surrounding how and where one may celebrate their culture are overseen by the British justice system, which respects the rule of law and upholds human rights. It remains the envy of the world. Now, Mr. Kearney would like us to believe that in a united Ireland, things would be much the same, that the political and cultural rights of unionists would be respected just as much as they are now. Yet in the latest Stormont saga, Sinn Féin's finance minister won't even let unionists plant a tree in order to celebrate Her Majesty's upcoming Jubilee. Yes, Sinn Féin thinks we should all do our bit for climate change, unless you happen to be a unionist, of course. Now, in summary, I urge this House to think critically about the arguments which have been made by Mr. Kearney and which will be made by the other opposition speakers this evening. I want you to consider the many benefits which Northern Ireland enjoys by remaining in the UK. But I also want you to consider what the UK gains from Northern Ireland. TV shows like Derry Girls, the musical titan Van Morrison, and even TV hero Adrian Dunbar, who stars in Line of Duty. They all hail from my wee place across the water. Now, recognizing just how rich our common heritage is and how much weaker the UK would be on the global stage as simply Great Britain, I urge you to vote in favor of the motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And we move straight across to the opposition side this evening. If you are popping out for a drink, please, can you do it quietly? Thank you. To our second speaker on the opposition side, Julie, I should have asked you this beforehand. Julie Lenan. Julie is a first-year MPhil student in Politics and International Relations at Keyes College. She won this slot through open audition. Julie, I look forward to your speech.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to begin, if you'll allow me, with my mother. She's a very civic-minded lady. She believes very strongly in the importance of voting, and she always votes herself, and that's something she impressed upon me. So I was pretty surprised when I rang her and I told her, Mom, I'm speaking in a union debate in Northern Ireland, and we had a chat about it, that she doesn't remember voting in the referendum on the Good Friday Agreement. Now, while she's certain that she did vote for it, that historic day isn't something that she remembers for some reason. It took us a while to get to the bottom of it, but as it turns out, sometimes the most simple answers are actually the right ones. My mum doesn't remember voting for the Good Friday Agreement because she was a little bit preoccupied at the time, being 8.5 months pregnant with me. Now, all of this is to say that I'm part of a generation of young people from the island of Ireland, the first such generation who know no other world than the world of the Good Friday Agreement. And it is as a member of that generation that I'm speaking from the opposition bench tonight. And my case is simple. Yes, Northern Ireland ought to depart the United Kingdom, but with the crucial caveat that it should only do so under particular constitutional conditions and under particular political conditions, which are already on the move from this side of the House and which we believe are achievable. Northern Ireland must prepare for a feasible departure from the United Kingdom, as the change which predicates that departure is coming. I'm going to get into that in more detail later on, but for now, as I've said, sometimes the simplest answers are the right ones, and the Good Friday Agreement is a prime example of this. My generation was lucky enough to be raised under its long-fought, long-negotiated, but very basic principles, among them respect for both traditions and communities, and for civil rights. But crucially, we were raised under a constitutional arrangement that gives us the democratic mechanisms by which Northern Ireland can leave the United Kingdom when, of course, and only when, a majority of her people wish to do so. The provisions for this are pretty straightforward, as I'm sure all of you know, but I'm going to discuss it anyway. In order for the North to leave the UK, there must be a border poll or a referendum in the north of Ireland, and another one, probably concurrently in the Republic of Ireland, freely given consent for the North to leave the UK and form some kind of united state comprising the island as a whole. These provisions, as I've said, are pretty simple. What they're not is specific. There's a common misconception, and particularly in the Republic of Ireland, I'll say, that the departure of the North from the UK would simply mean tacking the 6 counties onto the Republic of Ireland as it exists already. But there's absolutely no reason why it has to look like this. In fact, we don't have a solid conception of what a united Ireland, or in my preferred term, a new Ireland, would actually look like at the end of a northern departure process. What we need, before we even think about having those all-important border polls, is a clear vision of what that departure and unification would look like for both North and South. So a worst-case scenario, from where I'm standing, is 2 referendums with no clear outcomes in mind, that offer no model of governance for a new Ireland, no address of practical questions, like, for example, how many parliaments are we going to have? Are we going to have 1 in Dublin? Are we going to have 2, 1 in Dublin and 1 in Belfast? Are we going to have some kind of super parliament in the middle of the island? Should this new Ireland be some kind of federation? Could it be suggested that it rejoin the Commonwealth? I'm not necessarily recommending that it does, but these are the kinds of questions that we have to ask. Or is it that more common conception of the Republic of Ireland plus 6? These are not questions that I, nor anybody else, has satisfactorily answered at this moment in time. It would be far too easy to call a premature border poll and come out with a number along the lines of 48 to 52, and that number's kind of familiar, I'm not sure where I'm getting it from. Or worse still, a referendum that passes on one side of the border and not on the other. Because while that wouldn't kickstart the departure of the North from the United Kingdom, what it would do is throw the island of Ireland into political chaos and jeopardise our already fragile peace. Now, this might be starting to sound like a case for the proposition, but bear with me. Because like many young people from the island of Ireland, and I hope like all constitutional nationalists, my vote in any referendum on a new Ireland is going to depend entirely on the exact parameters of that referendum. On whether the models of government on offer are going to protect the peace of our island, on whether they're going to protect the rights of citizens from all traditions and communities in an increasingly diverse nation, no longer just made up of nationalists and unionists, and on whether they're going to build a strong democratic state that would be for the benefit of its people. Now, on the road to such a state, there are many factors to consider. What we would need to bring this about, as I've already mentioned, is some new parliamentary arrangement. We would need an integrated healthcare system, an integrated civil service, education system, transport links, welfare system, and improvements on any number of tricky practical questions and legal questions. Like, for example, right now, you can buy fireworks in the north of Ireland, but not in the south. What are we going to do about that? I could give you any number of these examples, but all of this is to admit, from the opposition bench, that there is work to be done. It will be no mean feat to create a reasonably integrated Ireland before we change its constitutional status. But what I believe is that it can be done, and that it must be done because that change is coming anyway, and we have to be ready for it. A border poll can only be called for the North, as we've already heard tonight, once it appears that her majority wish to leave the United Kingdom. And things are slowly moving in that direction. We keep hearing about the settled will of the people of Northern Ireland, but that will is not settled. Increasing numbers in Northern Ireland don't identify as either nationalist or unionist, as we heard from a floor speaker tonight. Unionist vote shares have dropped consistently, and Brexit, of course, has thrown the question of Europe into the mix, which means that the United Kingdom is not the only viable economic option for a new Ireland. Now, this demographic aspect of the road to departure has long been on the move, and when it comes to fruition, and it will come to fruition, I would much rather see a world where its fallout is a just and democratic transition. Now, this kind of cooperation has already been set in motion. The conversation has already started. So, for example, the Government of the Republic of Ireland recently brought in a new shared island unit in the Department of the Taoiseach, and it aims to foster collaboration between North and South, also with the British government, and it looks to address shared strategic challenges and build an all-island economy in cooperation with our closest neighbour. Now that I'm done reading the brochure for the shared island unit, it isn't explicitly intended to creep towards a new Ireland, but what it does demonstrate is the kinds of processes by which we're going to get there. Dialogue, consensus, the building of bridges under the auspices of the Good Friday Agreement, much in the same way that we, and by we, I mean the Island of Ireland and Her Majesty's government, brought Northern Ireland to the point of Good Friday in the first place. It didn't come about by accident. It was the culmination of decades-long efforts by politicians, activists, diplomats, civil servants, citizens from all traditions and communities who had in common the aim of peace on the island of Ireland. Before Good Friday, we had many other attempts. We had progress through the Sunningdale Agreement, the Anglo-Irish Agreement, the Downing Street Declaration, and while each of these fell short of taking the bomb and the bullet out of Anglo-Irish politics, what they did was each help to pave the road. Successive prime ministers in Taoiseach, successive generations of British and Irish diplomats, who I might add actually got to know each other and got to gain a better understanding of each other by working together in the European Union, they slowly but surely created the foundations of the peace settlement that we have today. It is my contention on this side of the House that we must proceed towards a Northern Irish departure from the United Kingdom in the same manner, in the manner of one of my own political heroes, in the manner of John Hume. He, among many others, steered the island of Ireland along a road to peace by moving quietly, moving consistently, slowly, by talking to people, more importantly, by listening to people, and by setting in motion the ripples that eventually create a wave of constitutional change. Northern Ireland ought to leave the United Kingdom at the end of a similar process, in such circumstances, and only in such circumstances, of working together towards democracy and stability. So I call on you all to vote against this motion in support of that work, in support of a strong, democratic Irish state, feasibly and painstakingly constructed at some point down the line. I'm not asking you to vote that Northern Ireland leave the United Kingdom, no thank you, in this moment, but in a moment to come. In a moment that is coming, when the greater question of constitutional status can be posed only after the 1,000 smaller questions of a new Ireland have already been answered. In that moment, I stand on this side of the House and on the foundations of the Good Friday Agreement. Thank you very much. Gurv Mahagov.
Thank you for that excellent speech, Julie. Would anyone like to speak in proposition of the motion this evening? At the back, to the right, I think was first. I think he did it first, the second one, on the first one.
Well, it's just going to be a short floor speech.
Name and college, please.
My name is Sal. I'm at Homerton. I'm just wondering, maybe there's... I'm not supporting the people who say this, but it just brought a thought to mind. Certain people in the past of Northern Ireland history have said, never, never, never. And that makes me think, what is so irreconcilable about the unionist identity with a sort of monolithic Irish state that was being described. And I think it's the fact that if unionist identity is defined by being in the union, taking them out of the union, is that not the same as denying them their expression of their identity? So I wonder if anyone has anything to add to that point. Thanks.
Well, if anyone does, you're free to do so now. Does anyone want to speak in opposition this evening? Sorry, just here. Thank you. There's a microphone and name and college, please.
Estelle, Jesus College. I wanted to direct my argument against some of the things that Sir Jeffrey Donaldson was saying. In particular, you kept on emphasising how, as a unionist, you really associate with this British identity, with British institutions, with British values. Yet, during the Home Rule crisis, was it not true that Ulster Unionists were quite prepared to completely reject the will of the British government if they were going to impose Home Rule on all of Ireland in its entirety?
If you'd like to respond.
We're in danger of, I think, getting dragged back to history. And history is important. But where we are today is that the future of Northern Ireland, as we've heard even from the opposition, will be determined not by a British government, but by the people of Northern Ireland themselves. At the heart of the Good Friday Agreement is the principle of consent. And I'm happy to have a history debate with you all day long, but I'd rather deal with the here and now and how we determine Northern Ireland's future. And Northern Ireland's future today is not going to be determined by an Irish government or a British government. At the heart of the Good Friday Agreement, it is for the people of Northern Ireland alone to determine their future. And in terms of the history, both Irish nationalism and Irish unionism opposed what the British government was trying to do at the time. Both sides were opposed to it for very different reasons.
Yeah.
If you'd like to have the last word, please.
No,
just not a dialogue.
and just in response to that, I'd like to say that the proposition has talked a lot about the idea of consent, but I want to ask, where was this principle of consent when in the 1918 general election, over 70 of the 100 seats went to Sinn Féin, which I think shows consent for their mandate of Home Rule for the entirety of Ireland.
Sorry, Sir Jeffrey, I'm going to have to move on. Sir Jeffrey, sorry, I'm going to have to move on. Yes, we've got to move through this.
Again, history.
Sir Jeffrey.
Again, history.
Sir Jeffrey.
The outcome...
Now, here.
The outcome of the general election was one thing, but the negotiation...
Sir Jeffrey, I'm going to have to ask you to sit down. I'm sorry, I'm very sorry.
The negotiation that followed for this in Ireland...
Almost made me kick you out, Sir Jeffrey. Would anyone like to make a very short speech in abstention this evening? You were first, so I'll go to the gentleman at the back.
Conrad, Wolfson College. I'm English. I am painfully English. I'm as English as overboiled parsnips served with lukewarm beer. But for that reason, I understand we've got so many wonderful people who are far closer to this issue in the House tonight. And I understand the complexity of this. I believe in unionism as an ideology on a personal note, but in the same way, I believe in unionism in the European Union. I fought fervently for that. And so I really understand how it disrupts the peace in Ireland and elsewhere, and frankly, tears up the whole situation. All of these things are infinitely complex. And frankly, I think I'm more making an appeal to any English people in this House. We've always stuck our nose in Ireland's business, Northern Ireland's business, all of this, and it's never gone well. So frankly, in that this is a union of consent, in that as it has been established, the Northern Irish people are the ones who get to decide, and it is right that that is the case. Just, why don't we just keep our noses out of it a bit? This time.
That seems to be well received by the House. Let's move to our final two speakers this evening. Many of you were probably expecting to hear Colin Eastwood finally this evening, But when we heard that Dara O'Reilly was available, we told Colin that there was no point in travelling. Dara is a first-year student of history and politics at Hughes Hall. Dara, I'm very much looking forward to wrapping up the events this evening.
Here now. Okay. Firstly, I'd like to say good morning, Mr. An Uachtaráin. Tommy Koenig Sau Fiona Manach, August Tommy Leon Colossi Hughes Hall, Sa Cambridge. I firstly would like to say that we are here with politicians who are slightly older than I think the speakers here. And it's very important that we are having this debate with David, with yourself, Julianne, that we're able to do that in 20, 30, 40 years ago we wouldn't have been able to do that. And I think it's testament to these two politicians here. I think it's testament to people like Momola and people like Monica Williams, that we are people like Bernadette Devlin, that we're able to have conversations like this, and that is unbelievably critical. But quite clearly, Northern Ireland is on a precipice. We don't know if the gentleman opposite is even going to form a government in 3 months' time, which I think it was interesting that we weren't told anything really about that. We were told that we live in a family of identities. We were told we live in wonderful diversity. We were told that we are able to identify as whatever we want. What else were we told by... sorry, I only got this gig about 2 hours ago. We were told that we had the best healthcare in the world, and we were told that you all should go and learn about my country on the telly with Michael Portillo. I think that tells you everything about the problem with Anglo-Irish relations, because you do not learn it in school. Heck, you barely learn it in the history degree. Far away. That is such a shock. That's such a shock. Because isn't it the case today that they're having to buy back all of the Ministry of Defence houses that he sold off 25 years ago? It's got everything to do with it. What we saw with Brexit is that the British state has now become an ethno-nationalist construct. Some of you mightn't agree with that, others will. What we've seen in the past 25... I'm sorry, I'm going to make progress because we don't actually have that much time, but I'll give you in a few minutes. The British state is quite clear in the ethno-nationalist construct, at least from the way I see it. Now, look, you can have varying different views upon that, but I think definitely after campaigning in North West Durham for a certain party, that the level of white nationalist politics in this country, or sort of white identity politics, is quite strong. I would have had a different answer to this question 5 years ago. I am a committed Anglophile. I was born in London. I went to school for a bit in England. Heck, I'm here for university. The idea that I don't like this country is insane. You know, Pret isn't that bad once you get over the prices. But the thing is that the hope of sharing sovereignty, which was the whole idea of the Good Friday Agreement, is totally and utterly dead. The model of parliamentary democracy, with the Parliament in Westminster where we have 18 seats out of 650, and it doesn't matter if Declan turns up, because in every single vote we lose on monetary policy, it's 532 votes from England and 18 from Northern Ireland. On monetary policy, on foreign policy, again and again, we lose by a margin of 450 to 500. How on earth can you call that a union of equals? Sorry, yeah. How else can you call it a union of equals when the Border and Nationalities Bill, which is coming to the Parliament at the minute?
Point of information.
Yeah, okay.
So is it the case in a United Ireland that Northern Ireland, which is, what, 1/4 of the population of Ireland, would have 50% of the seats in an Irish Parliament?
The figures I saw is actually 36% of the population. And you know what? As someone from Fermanagh, I'd be more than happy to have half the seats in that place. And this is the thing, it's about advocating for Northern Ireland. And I will not have anyone come here and say I do not like Northern Ireland, I do not feel Northern Irish, because that is, well, that's sort of inalienable. But the thing is that, let me continue, I shall try and refine my place. I actually will just talk about economics, because that's actually some of the most illogical stuff I've heard here. Utter economic illiteracy. I never thought to be lectured by a man whose government is growing at the economy at the slowest rate in years and who has frozen real wages for the past 12 years, wages today are lower than they were in 2007, and by a man whose party is so mired in alleged corruption that, the idea of fiduciary responsibility when it comes to running government deficits from the DUP, who just love to spend, and from yourself, Conor, in terms of the ability to manage money. Sorry now, I have to make this sort of up on the spot. The problem, however... Sorry? Yeah, hey, I don't mind, yeah.
Was it the British government that gave money to the Irish government when the Irish economy failed?
Yes, and the ECB and the IMF, it doesn't really matter. Britain is part of the Paris Club, and therefore it will give money. It simply does not matter where the money is from. We will get it from some sort of international institution. I don't think that particularly matters. I think what matters much more is that the European Union, through its Next Generation EU Fund, is giving 750 billion euros of investment all across electrifying railway lines, which is something we don't have in Belfast, creating jobs, aiding the climate transition. Currently, the Republic of Ireland spends 5% a year on its GDP on infrastructure, the National Development Plan, if you have a look at it. When you go and compare that to Northern Ireland, we are seeing in no way that kind of a comparable level of investment. When you go to the south, child poverty halves. When you go to the south, you go from an average wage of £27,000 a year to a full-time wage of £48,000. You go from having the dole unemployment benefit from, £56 a week or whatever they cut it the other day. You go from that to €200 to €250. Child poverty is halved, investment is higher. We fear that we are going to be chained to an economically sclerotic country. Britain is not going to grow, regardless of whatever Brexit fantasy you've come up with. And even in Northern Ireland today, we've learned that €100 million of EU funds are not going to be replaced, and the Minister for the Economy, which I believe is a DUP minister, is now cutting apprenticeships and student places. Could
the economic difficulties facing Northern Ireland today not have something to do with the violent campaign of terrorism enacted by Irish nationalists for many, many years now?
Yeah, that's not true. So basically in 1920, it's not. In 1920, they set up an imperial contribution fund, which we paid into. We stopped paying into that and started taking money off you in 1932. So 1932 to 1972, I don't know, it's a bit of a gap, personally. But the thing is that what kind of choice is it to be in a country where you have to receive a bailout at every moment? What kind of country is it to simply ask for money from the Tories all the time? We see no real attempt to grow the economy. I always think of this levelling up. Sorry, I'll make a little bit of progress. If we're going to have this idea of levelling up, which is given to us, it's been dumped in the current situation, noting the cake and all that crack, as was said, that if we're going to have levelling up, when you are cutting the real terms budget of the Northern Ireland Assembly, how is that going? You can POI me if you want, because you tried to say, yes, Vira. Well, Agenda and I magazine said when they looked at it, if you look at inflation over the next 3 years, the multi-annual budget, which was given to Mr. Declan Cooley's comrade. So, inflation, it doesn't really matter what... So you're spending... Okay, great. Yeah, it's good to hear from a Thatcherite you want to, massively increase the amount of money being spent on the state. I actually don't think you believe that. Sorry. Yeah.
We talk about levelling up, we talk about this all in economic terms, and the extension of economic opportunities from those in London, the South East, to Northern Ireland, across the UK. What about levelling up in terms of justice? We have seen the government's proposals for legacy, which I think all the parties in Northern, something Declan and Jeffrey can agree on. Was it a disgrace? What issue do we think that has on the future of Northern Ireland, and how can we talk about levelling up in economic if it's not in justice?
I think
law is equal for everyone.
If you do not give justice to what happened in the past, you are just lying to yourself you're going to be able to rebuild the country. There's just no hope at all that you're going to do that. And I agree with you in terms of shared education. But when I look to the South, which will now have a man of Irish and Indian heritage become the Taoiseach in 7 or 8 months' time, when I look to a country that's liberalised its abortion laws, not by some sort of parliamentary procedure, but by a referendum of 67%, whilst Jeffrey opposes, and whilst he opposes equal marriage, and why some of the people in his party said often horrible things about the gay community, I am not going to take lectures in inclusion from yourself, Jeffrey. It is simply madness. We are also told as well, if we move on from the element of trying to bring society back together. We're told we've got the best health service in the world. When a friend of mine was given between 1 year and six years for sort of doing in his knee, basically, in a football match. What kind of country is that? And also, I think you talk about the consumer index or whatever. If you look, the Irish government is proposing Sláintecare, that all the parties of the Republic of Ireland are agreeing to bring in universal health care because they feel the need to do it. And the Irish government also spends more money per capita than the NHS. Fire away.
So why does the Irish government still not have that universal health care? Why, even though there's now a state system of health insurance, why are something like 37% of people still not entitled to get that for free? Why have they not done it when the UK has had that system of universal health care for a long, long time?
A system of universal health care posed by the official Unionist Party when they ran Northern Ireland, let's not remember that, and they tried to barrack the introduction of national insurance. No, it's true, Jeffrey. I can't help it but tell the truth. But on your point in terms of why isn't there health care, I would probably say the terrible legacy of partition, leading to a Catholic supremacy, which meant that we were never able to have something like the mother and baby scheme in the 1950s under Dr. Noel Brown. We were never able to move towards universal healthcare because the trade union movement, North and South, was divided, and because working people were split up. As they were in the 1932 outdoor relief riots, they were split up vehemently and purposely by both nationalist and unionist sectarians. In terms of conclusion, I'm in favour of United Ireland. But this isn't your fight. We are a sovereign people, regardless of what the Tories want to do in terms of removing our devolution and destroying it. Let us make that decision. Yes, please.
Would you agree that the prospect of an entirely new constitutional discussion about the future of Ireland gives Unionist and Protestant people and those who have come to make Ireland their home from other places the best opportunity to redesign new constitutional, democratic, political arrangements to ensure that the island of Ireland, on the basis of self-determination, becomes an outward-looking, inclusive, European, multicultural and liberal society?
Well, no, why that's so important, because we never heard about 100,000 people in Northern Ireland who aren't UK citizens. We never heard about the thousands of people from a Polish background, the thousands of people from a Portuguese background coming to where we live to make it better. And I fundamentally believe that. Conor Burns does not. Jeffrey Dunn says every single term. Want to cut immigration? You believe in separating people on basically nonsense. I remember the Brexit campaign. I remember the horrible posters. I know I was 16, but I still had eyes and ears. So to conclude, we need to take the Constitution from 1937 and put it in the bin. We need to come together as a people and do that. And if that means devolution, if that means some sort of form of federalism, let's do that. But as I said, it is for the Irish people, without a gun in the battle, to decide what we do. So please, either vote for it or abstain. It's up to you. I won't tell you what to do. All right.
Thank you, Dara. Just before we all go, I won't comment on the substance of the speeches, but I would like to agree with Dara. I think it's very symbolic that we're talking about this issue here tonight. Thank you very much to everyone for getting involved. I've got no notices because I think we need to get in the bar. You vote with your feet here. There's an aye door, there's a no door, there's an abstain door. Thank you very much for coming. Good evening.